All right, we're good. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Concordia University's Force-Space. Thanks for joining us. Today's event's Through the Lens of Aging, a short film showcase. If you're just arriving, we just want to help situate you. We're streaming to YouTube, and we're live from Force-Space. And we are also located on unceded Indigenous lands in Chichage, Montreal. Here at Force-Space, we work with our university community, mobilizing knowledge with daily activities. With that, it's just my pleasure to hand it over to the coordinator at Engage, Tristana Martin-Rubio. Tristana, welcome in.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, welcome to Through the Lens of Aging, a short film showcase. We're going to get started pretty quickly. We'll be screening 3 films. The first, Mental Health by Kim Sawchuk and Sam Thulin. The second, Souvenirs de nos Quartiers, Mile End by Wendy Allen. And the third, Moles by Liz Miller. In just a minute, I'll introduce each of the video makers, the media makers, who will come to the front and say a few words about their video. And then after the screening, after we've seen all 3, we'll invite them up and we'll have a panel discussion, and you'll be welcome to pose questions to each of the panelists. So the first video we'll present today is Mental Health by Kim Sawchuk and Sam Thulin. Kim Sawchuk is a professor in communication studies, scientific director of the ACT Lab, and director of Engage. For the past 30 years, Kim's work has been involved with art, activism, and academia. In the 1990s, she co-founded Studio XX, now known as Ada X, the first feminist digital media studio in North America. She is the former editor of the Canadian Journal of Communications, has edited numerous book collections, and published over 100 articles, including the path-breaking article on research creation with Owen Chapman. Kim wrote her first piece on aging in 1996 and has continued to engage in research that explores the intersections of aging in and with technology. In her research, Kim takes participatory action research to heart, continually striving to redress social inequities, encouraging people to become emboldened to speak back to power and to find creative solutions to make a better world. Sam Thulin is an artist and a researcher interested in the specificities of spaces and places and in the movements and resonances of bodies, data, and sounds. His artwork and publications explore topics such as locative media and contested senses of place, confluences of cartography and auditory culture, self-tracking, chronic illness, and identification, and creative and emergent research methodologies. Solo and collaborative projects include multi-channel sound installations, compositions made from data sonification, interactive geolocated soundscapes and narratives for mobile apps, music made from found sounds and field recordings, live audio performances, place-based soundtracks for public transit, kinesthetic and vibrational multisensory installations, and compositions spanning genres from acoustic singer-songwriter to instrumental post-rock to ambient and experimental to electronic dance music. He holds a PhD in communication studies from Concordia University and works as an administrative coordinator and research associate at the ACT Lab. So I want to invite Kim and Sam to come up and say a few words before we present their film.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks everyone for coming. So the film that we're showing is called Mental Health Matters, and it's part of a series actually of 5 videos that we've been working on in a series called Navigating Turbulence. They're all about community sector workers, older adults, and policymakers and their experience putting in place programs and serving older adults during the COVID-19 pandemic. So each one of the 5 videos takes a different theme and approach. based on 32 in-depth interviews that were done with these various folks. And so the way that we created these was to start really with the interviews themselves, and especially with listening to the audio from the interviews and the voices of people. And we were very kind of captivated by these voices and these stories that were told. And we worked on editing and creating kind of narratives in these films through listening to the voices. And we took an approach to editing that was also trying to maintain the spaces, the pauses, the moments of reflection in the voice rather than looking for the soundbite, and also trying to include, because these interviews were primarily done over Zoom, given the conditions of the pandemic, some of that mediation, the technological mediation that was going on, some of the weird things that just happen over Zoom, the different places people were speaking from and the technologies they were using. We also wanted to create sort of connections between voices and audio transitions. And so you'll hear excerpts from people speaking, and then you'll hear a kind of musical interlude where we searched for the musicality in the voices themselves, and those musical interludes are drawn directly from the voice. So in this one, we used a different technique in each of the 5, but in this one, that technique is something called granular synthesis. And essentially, we're pulling little fragments from the audio, from the voice, and extending those in time, so it creates an almost choral sound that links the voices together. I would invite Kim to speak a little bit about the video as well, the images. I worked much more on the sound, and Kim had a lot of influence over what you'll see as well.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so we really wanted to honor the sounds and the voices that we were listening to in the audio track. And we also wanted to make a video that was complementary to that and didn't take away from the listening space that we thought was so important. So we really, for all 5 pieces, decided on very slow-moving kind of landscape images so that we hope that people will enter into a space of reflection and not overwhelm you with just too much information. I'd also like to say that this was very much a group effort. So Sam and myself worked on the audio concept, and Sam did all the technical aspects and the musical interludes you're going to hear that I think are wonderful. But other people like Christina Haralanova did both interviews, helped with transcription, and again, helped with captioning. Isabella Boyega from the MA program in Media Studies did the videos for this project and did a wonderful job. And then there's numerous other people, Shannon Hebblethwaite, Megan Joy, Tracy Swim from WIN, who all contributed to the overall project, as well as 2 other researchers, Katie and Lori. And they're all named in there. We'd also just like to thank all the community workers who took the time to answer us and answer the call during what was a really stressful time. And we've played some of these back to them, and we're just finishing these up now and sharing them with you. What's also important to us is that they're captioned in English and French with the original, because I have a hard time hearing sometimes. And sometimes they're captioned, if you want to listen only in French, you can listen to it with French subtitles, or you can listen with English subtitles. So each video has 3 possibilities, the original, the French, and the English. So we were also, the captioning and the slow-moving images for us were also very important in terms of accessibility. So if you can't hear well, maybe you can read or just watch the slow-moving image. And if you can't see, you can still listen. So hopefully, whatever you find yourself capable of doing, you'll derive something from what it is we now have to offer you. Thank you.
it was so much worse than anybody can imagine. You know, when you had to live through this, we saw on the TV every day, and we developed great compassion for the healthcare workers. And you know, my sister's a nurse, and I have enormous respect for what they went through. But we were like the unseen people who suffered in the background, and maybe you saw a few seconds of clips, you know, with running around with boxes of food. But what our sector went through collectively was horrifying.
C'est sûr qu'il y a une surcharge aussi du fait que les autres ressources sont insuffisantes. Puis là, ben, ça fait que dans le grand entonnoir, à la fin, il y a les organismes communautaires. Puis c'est pas mal le dernier filet de sécurité. Mm-hmm. Fait que c'est sûr que ça crée une pression sur les travailleuses. Puis sur moi, dans mon rôle de gestion, c'est sûr que ça met de la pression parce que là, tu veux vraiment, tu veux pas laisser tomber ces personnes-là parce que tu sais qu'en dessous de toi, il n'y a rien. Tu sais.
Je ne sais pas s'ils savent, mais le CDC, les hôpitaux, les CIUSH, j'espère qu'ils savent à quel point ça ne marcherait pas si le communautaire n'était pas là. On peut faire de la prévention, on peut faire du dépistage, mais aussi c'est désengorger un peu, ça faire le tri. Il y a des choses que oui, ça va aller jusqu'au CLSC, à l'hôpital, tout ça, mais c'est de rediriger vers les bonnes ressources aussi. Donc, si les personnes se rendaient seulement à ces endroits-là, il y aurait plein de besoins qui ne seraient pas répondus. Je pense que l'isolement serait encore plus grand.
Tous les lieux de rencontre habituels, hein, je pense par exemple certains bars dans le village pour les hommes aînés gays, ou certains cafés, c'était vraiment des lieux de quotidien, d'interaction sociale. Parfois, leurs interactions sociales elles tournaient autour de ces lieux-là. Mm-hmm. Et le fait que le lieu-là soit fermé pendant très très longtemps, ça a dû créer beaucoup d'isolement supplémentaire.
And one woman who's a flight over and down, who I'd never engaged with much. I didn't get the impression that she liked my existence, but she talked to me for about an hour at one point that, I guess she was feeling really lonely.
One of the things that we are coming out of this pandemic is with a new appreciation for the importance of recreation in the lives of all people, including seniors. Because one of the things that they expressed to us is how distressed they were when we shut down our activities and they couldn't come to their painting class that they look forward to. They couldn't come and play pool. They couldn't come and play bridge. And I think that we've come out of this pandemic with a new appreciation of the importance of recreation for mental health and general well-being.
Sauf quand il y a des services à domicile où là, souvent, les personnes aînées LGBT, elles n'osent pas faire appel aux services à domicile parce que elles ont peur qu'il y ait des indices chez elles de leur orientation sexuelle ou de leur identité de genre. Mais ça, c'est un phénomène qui existait déjà. On sait qu'elles utilisent peu les services de santé, peu les services sociaux, moins que la moyenne en tout cas. Et là, de toute façon, avec la Covid, il y a eu une interruption des services à domicile, enfin certains d'entre eux. Donc, là, ça a dû avoir un impact sur certaines personnes âgées LGBTQ+, mais peut-être moins sur la population en général, parce qu'à la base, elles évitaient déjà ces services-là. Mm-hmm. Peut-être un petit peu moins que la moyenne, tout en gardant à l'esprit que c'est des populations qui sont plus isolées et plus coupées de leur famille aussi à la base. Donc, leur réseau d'amis, etc., tous ceux qui étaient en résidence étaient plus ou moins enfermés dedans.
Pour rejoindre les gens à domicile, on téléphonait à 800 personnes par semaine pour vérifier que tout allait bien. On a été aussi appelés dans des situations d'urgence où la pandémie a touché, je dirais, beaucoup psychologiquement des aînés parce qu'il y a à peu près eu une douzaine de suicides. Donc, on était rapidement appelés pour intervenir. C'est la direction de la santé publique qui nous a demandé que les travailleurs de milieu avec les policiers fassent le porte-à-porte. Mais ça a été très constructif par la suite parce qu'on a mis en place du personnel qui soutienne ces aînés-là et on est présent maintenant toutes les semaines.
Money and space and people who want to do this with working conditions that are decent. Because I don't think we need more exploited people, in our society. Mm-hmm. We saw enough of that with all these essential workers, people, who were working at Amazon and all these things for minimum wage and putting their lives at risk driving, these vehicles. I mean, it was so bad. So I don't think, the community sector needs more exploited people. We should have sufficient funding. And I think we proved ourselves. If ever there was like a proving ground in life, I'd say this pandemic was it. So, if there's something that it's to show that we stepped up. Mm-hmm. So now, now it's time for, I think, government to sort of recognize, okay, this is a big part of how we support society. I don't know, but I think about it like I'm getting, I'm getting palpitations. Just the pressure that we were under. And I don't know how my staff did it. I really don't know how they all just didn't quit. But it was just sheer dedication and empathy with the suffering that they were hearing every day. And I think that's what it was, because I'm sure they would have been much, better off personally if they had all just left. Because, I know I thought about it every day. I'm like, am I crazy? What am I doing? What am I doing? Like what? So we survived that.
Il y a des gens qui n'osaient même pas sortir de chez eux. Une de mes amies aînées, elle n'allait même pas dans le couloir, tu sais. Fait que c'est vraiment, il y en a que ça a été une prison pour eux autres, tu sais, une vraie prison, là. Mm-hmm. Sauf qu'il n'y avait pas de barreau, là, mais ça reste quand même une prison, tu sais. Quand tu ne peux pas sortir de chez vous, là.
And they don't have family doctor or don't have a social worker, the time for them to get this kind of help can go very long. Same for mental health system. So either for volunteers or members, the system is quite long. Sometimes you have to wait up to 1 year to get to see someone to assist you with your mental health.
People at this point knew that elderly people were really going through terrible, terrible time. And so we had to, again, mobilize and distribute these 400 bags in person. And it was horrible. It was really good to do it, but you could see these people, the state they were in, and we just hoped they would make it. But it was really, really, it damaged all of us in some way. We bought air conditioners, mattresses. People broke their dentures. What are you going to do? We used a lot, a chunk of our emergency money to pay for things like this. people became incontinent because they were so close to the bathroom. They stopped waiting to go to the bathroom. So they just would get used to going every 20, 30 minutes. And then when they went out, they realized, oh, I can't go out now that I can go out. So we buying briefs because they couldn't afford briefs. Those are expensive, those adult diapers. So we bought those, and so now, if I could just add, we're in a terrible situation because this poverty is so bad and we don't have all this emergency money. And, we're trying to figure out how are we going to continue to support these people. So now we have to try and appeal to, funders to understand that we're in this, what we call, post-pandemic world, that it's not going to be back to normal for everybody.
C'est de maintenir, c'est d'être la capacité de maintenir l'ensemble de tous ces services-là, parce au niveau de la pandémie, on a quand même créé une forme de besoin ou une forme de présence qui fait que les gens s'attendent à ce que ça va rester à ce niveau-là.
I'm just saying, these organizations, they should be helped, they should be appreciated, they should get government money to do more even, because the older generation happens to be here now, and I find nobody cares about the old people anymore. When you see what's happening in the senior residences, good grief. So these organizations, they are very, very precious and important. But they also need support.
So you start telling the story, but it's like anybody with PTSD, which we kind of all had. I mean, let's be honest, right? We were traumatized at this point. So we get to tell the story over and over. And I mean, it was kind of difficult to go through that. But I think people who did it, like, that's why, I'm doing this here, is because we want there to be some sort of an evidence.
We'll go to the next video by Wendy Allen. The title of her video is Souvenirs de nos quartiers Mile End. Wendy Allen has been involved with Concordia's Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling since 2008, after retiring from a career in international development. In 2016, Wendy discovered Eric Craven's, Eric's right here, digital literacy project at the Atwater Library, which inspired her to combine her interests in oral history with research creation approaches. Using these methodologies, Wendy continued to explore the city and to listen to the stories of people who live here, participating in projects such as Promenade Parlant, a creative walk through Shawnigassi Village. It is a retirement she never imagined. Through these creative engagements, Wendy has become aware of the wealth of resources available in Montreal and learned new skills. Wendy, would you like to come and say a few words?
Thank you, Tristana, and thank you, everybody. This is very interesting for me because I am not like Sam and Kim. I'm a very amateur video maker. I wouldn't call myself a filmmaker, but maybe I make videos. It's been fantastic for me over all of these years. And this project in particular, which took place during the pandemic, saved me and in fact made the pandemic kind of a pleasant experience, weirdly enough. What we did, all our interviews were on video. And Eric was in one place. It appeared on the screen on the left. I was at my place, appeared on the right, and the people we interviewed appeared down below until we started the interview. One of the people is here today. It's Aldo Marchini, and that interview was done in February 2023. It was still pandemic. Really, though, this may be, as much as for me personally, it's very, very absorbing to work on these, to do the interviews and to work on the recordings. The real importance, I think, of this work is to work in a community of practice. And Eric has, I would say, created or invented an approach that's very, very interesting. It's a way of developing digital literacy through projects that we're interested in. So the community works together, and in this case, it was under two projects, his own, which was with New Horizons for Seniors, and another one at Concordia, La Ville Extraordinaire. And it was about our neighborhoods and other communities in Montreal. So I had just moved to Mile End, and hadn't been able to get out much or talk to people or meet people. And suddenly I had this whole world in Mile End with these 9 interviews that you're going to see on here. I'd like to just introduce Aldo, since he's here, Aldo Marchini, and you'll see him in a few minutes. Save everything else I was going to say for some discussion afterwards. Thank you.
And we used to go to the synagogue with our little flags and our candles. And the synagogue was a beauty. It was small enough and large enough. It was just the right size. It was like a community synagogue. And it had 2 staircases on either side that led you into the main hall. And there was a sense of beauty in that synagogue, and special. And yeah, I remember being part of that larger community in that synagogue, that Jewish community.
Says, when I walked out of my house, the first house, to go somewhere at night, I lived on the north side of the street, so I turned left to go over to St. Urban and to end up in a place which some people will remember called Lux or Lux, which was this wonderful emporium on the Main, just north of Fairmount on Saint Laurent, which was open 24 hours a day. Architecture was very interesting. There was this big room in the middle with a dome surrounded by magazines, and there were tables in the middle, and it was a bistro. You get snacks 24 hours, 7 days a week, and you could go for a plate of frites if you wanted or something more. And you looked at the magazines, sometimes you bought them, but it was a place for meeting. It was a real rendezvous. And for a while, I remember Radio Canada even used to have a weekly program from there, in which they spoke about what was going on in town in the art scene. It was the trailblazer, it was the vanguard, because surrounding it were shops that sold refrigerator parts, sort of hardware stores. And thanks to Lux, it gave that impulse, that shot in the arm, so that there was, without too much exaggeration, an explosion of bistros, cafes, restaurants. Apropos of green spaces, both in my two dwellings on Claremont, across the street, and here, I had the immense good fortune of having a small front garden and a slightly bigger back one, which have been, in both cases, the joy of my existence. My current back garden is the belly button of my universe. And if I have the privilege of a few more years of life, I think it will be, in fact, thanks to that garden, which is now under a blanket of snow. And I go to my window and look out at that blanket, and I think there are living things asleep underneath it. And every spring there's that miracle of the regrowth. And I'm not what I would call a conventionally religious person, but if I ever have moments of mysticism in my life, it's standing in the garden, just watching things unfold and realizing that that birch tree that I planted when I moved in here 30 years ago, that I could hold between my thumb and forefinger, is now I can't wrap my two arms around it. And you read and you learn that there's more of that birch underground that I cannot see, that above ground. And these things just trigger all kinds of, what's the word I'm looking, mystical thoughts? The thought that we're here talking on this wonderful thing we have because somewhere in the distance past, somebody planted a seed or accidentally planted a seed, something grew that they could eat. And they decide, well, let's just stay here and pitch our tents. And here we are. We have urban civilization. I figured out a while ago that between the two places across the street and here, I planted about 20 trees and very large shrubs, most of which are still alive and pumping oxygen as we speak. So I hope when I stand at the pearly gates and they ask, have you been a good green citizen? I say, well, I tried, and here I am. And
all of the spots I'm going to mention right now, and unfortunately, only a fraction of them are still standing. Some of them closed in the years leading up to COVID due to gentrification and condo owners moving in nearby and complaining of the noise. And noise fines eventually buried those businesses. I'm talking about, for instance, Divan Orange off of Rachel and St. Lawrence, which is a long-time Montreal indie band institution. There's Blizzard as well on St. Lawrence, Lower St. Lawrence, which was a legendary spot. And, it was a stomping ground for many, many Montreal DJs back in the day, including the Brass Knuckles crew that was Simon B. Similac and the two DJs who would go on to become the Goods and organize the legendary Goods Nights, Scott C. and Andy Williams, who also had a show at CKUT. There was KGB as well. It used to be at the corner of Saint Viateur and St. Lawrence, and that was just a real tragic case of just rapacious, unfathomable business practices. It was a bit run down, but it was very homey, very warm, and you could always count on doing something there if you needed a quick event space to do that poetry reading or some experimental music, or you had somebody passing through town and you needed a quick venue. You could always go in there and count on them. The character of the neighborhood has totally changed. There's only a few places remaining that are not gentrified. I mentioned a few of them already. Welch's Bookstore. There's a few on Fairmount, of course, Wilansky's and the old Hollywood Barbershop, used to be one of them. I mean, it's not gentrified yet. The current owner, Ahmed, is trying to keep it as it was, but it's no longer $10. And there's some talk that he might also sell the establishment. There's the old Philo hardware store, which has not been open for a long time since the pandemic. I don't know what's happening with them. The old Rex Taylor's, which is on Villeneuve and Esplanade, it's run by a very nice Greek couple who've been there for ages. He was very nice. And there's the old Button Shop on St. Lawrence as well, just south of Quincaillerie Azores. These are some of the few places remaining from the old plateau, the old Maine, that I still frequent. I try to support these places because those, for me, make up some of the character that I remember when I first arrived. To be able to walk around and feel the stories and feel the history through the people who've lived here and have the city in their blood. So you just don't get that anymore with these upscale furniture places.
The street that we lived on between Villeneuve, or actually maybe Saint-Joseph, no, between Villeneuve and Mont-Royal, was really a community of people who knew each other. There were about 40 children between all of us, and we were all from different ethnic persuasions. There were Ukrainians, there was somebody from Poland, there was somebody, Americans, there were American Canadians, right? And we didn't realize, but that we had bought into the whole Hutchison Hot Cats. The Hutchison Hot Cats was a baseball team, and they had rented every summer for the kids and for the adults a place where we would play baseball. It was great. So what we did was we created a kind of a co-op for parents that we could help each other babysit. So we didn't have to worry about who was how did we get our babysitters? We babysat for each other. So if we were going somewhere, our kids were in somebody's home that they knew that we knew.
My children went to École Lambert-Closse, which is still there in Bernard. But we also went to a Garderie Populaire in Outremont, which is also still there, Frisson des Collines. And there was much more of a feeling in Montreal of social solidarity. Unions were strong. We had to fight for our locale, for our daycare. So there was a lot of community action that a lot of people participated in, and that extended, and also it was the rise of the PQ. So there was a real feeling of appropriation or something of the space. And I remember my kids coming home from school and saying, "C'est quoi Québécois? suis-tu Québécois?" with their Québécois accents. I mean, even the way they spoke English was heavily accented by local French. Suis-tu Québécois? And I said, on verra bien. We'll see how it goes.
How this print shop came to be is very like my personality, like organic, I guess. It came out of a need to do something for what I was doing, like for the bigger picture of what I was doing, which was in 2000, me and my partner at the time started the music venue that's beneath us called Casa del Popolo, with just a credit card and a bunch of like DIY spirit, I guess.
And so the print shop, how was that related to Casa del Popolo?
Because as soon as we because back then there was really no internet. Like there's, like in 2000, was there internet? I can't even remember. Not for music, passing of music information yet. So people would put paper posters on the street still to advertise. And that was how we got word of mouth around. And a lot of people got word of mouth around back then, especially through the 90s and into the early 2000s. But we still put paper posters on the street. I really like working on the posters I make for Michael Hurley because he considers himself a werewolf. So I always get to put some kind of werewolf stuff in there. I don't know how many posters I've made over the years.
Like hundreds?
Thousands.
Thousands?
Yes. Because we, for 22 years, had music almost 365 days a year. And then a bunch of those shows, not all of them by any means, but like at least 100, 150 shows a year, we were producing ourselves as well.
Practice space was on 10 Pine in the basement. That was the first real practice space, and I got that because I joined a different band called Sacto, and that really opened doors for people who are a little more integrated into the kind of the fabric of the music scene, and so that helped me meet a lot of different people. Like one of our shows we had, we was at a pizza place. Where they had a kind of a $5 show and a free slice of pizza at Pizza Dore, which was right across from the Miami. So we did that, and we dragged our stuff up on sleds from 10 Pine up the half the block, up the thing in there, and and I think we even played for less than $5 because we wanted it. We were always concerned that we'd be accessible.
Well, we got married in the church on the Laurier Park, and we had a great party at the Saleh.
I actually DJ'd my own wedding, so perhaps that's one of the reasons I like the playlist.
No, but it was great. I mean, my mom danced till 2 in the morning.
I made so many relationships with my neighbors over plants. So I've shared seeds with about 15 of my neighbors in my current location. So meaning 15 different people in this block. So the block that I'm in now, actually, I think that probably 12 or 13 different nationalities are represented in this block. And so it was very interesting. So some neighbors were like vegetable gardeners. So I was exchanging okra seeds and, these different beans from India, with one of my neighbors. And then also he loved my corpse flower plants. And so I had to, exchange a corpse flower bulb for some seeds. So, on and on like this.
Great. So the last video we'll show today is Moles by Liz Miller. Professor Liz Miller is a documentary media maker and community media artist who uses collaboration and interactivity to connect personal stories to larger, timely social issues. Liz has developed media advocacy and visual art projects with women, youth, senior citizens, and a wide range of human rights organizations. Her films and educational campaigns such as Mapping Memories, Swampscapes, The Shoreline, and The Waterfront have won international awards and have been integrated into educational curricula and influenced decision makers. Miller has served on the board of the International Association of Women in Television and Radio, and has partnered with Witness and UNESCO to offer workshops in water journalism, media production, and digital storytelling. Her co-authored book with Stephen High and Ted Little, Going Public, The Art of Participatory Practice, published in 2017, is accompanied by a website profiling the work of 29 socially engaged practitioners, exploring the political, aesthetic, and performative dimensions of their work. So I'll invite Liz Miller to come and say a few words about moles.
It's such a pleasure to be here, and I just want to appreciate all the wonderful organizations that play such an important role, like Codes or the Outwater Library, in convening people, in helping us find our creative voices, in telling stories. I love bringing people together. I love hearing other people's stories, but I'm quite shy to share my own. And many years ago, a dear friend said, Liz, you're really good at telling other people's stories, but at some point you're going to have to sit down and reckon with yourself. And so Moles was the first time I tried to do that. And I basically said, well, what should I tell? I mean, like, what's unique about me? I wasn't that interested in telling my own story. So I said, well, okay, I have all these moles all over my body, and I'm just going to use them as a story prompt, kind of like each mole is a personal memory. So in order to gather the courage to tell my own story, I gave myself this prompt, 75% true. I only had to I figured, like, between my memory and my fear of telling my own story, I'd find something there. So the first version of Moles came out in 1998, and it was an interactive documentary online. The internet had just exploded, and I was kind of curious, like, can I make art? And can I tell personal stories in this venue? And so each piece was very short, and that version of Moles was my coming out story. So I basically talked about, I went really public to tell a really personal story, but honestly I had no idea what the internet was and how most people weren't using the internet as we use it today. So then 20 years later, I decided it was time to revisit that terrifying task of telling my own story. And I thought, well, why not use the same prompt? But this time, in telling the story of moles, I was dealing with a lot of different issues. The first time, it was kind of a gimmick or a game. The second time, it was really about confronting mortality. And it was about the moles on my body that had been malignant, and the moles on my parents' skin that they were extracting. And so there was a whole different relationship to using these blemishes or beauty marks or whatever we want to call them as a story prompt. So again, I just want to say this has always been a scary venture for myself in front of the limelight. But I feel like I'm in such good company today. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm just so grateful for everybody who put in the labor and work to bring us together. And this, we were talking about COVID. This project was about to go live March 11th, right before COVID hit. And so then I got to hide for a few more years. So this is its official premiere. Thank you.
I launched my moles website 20 years ago in 1999. The idea was click on a mole, discover a story. For most of the site, I used HTML, but then I discovered Flash. With Flash, I could stream up to 7 seconds of media. It was a breakthrough. In my technical notes, I suggested Netscape 4.6 as the preferred mode of transportation, as if browsers would take us to new places. To back up all the files, I used a zip disk with just 100 megabytes of storage. Today, I have endless storage in the cloud, which is very convenient, but it doesn't calm my worries about privacy, memory loss, or just time passing. The tools I used 20 years ago are now obsolete. Zip drives lasted for about 9 years, Netscape was around for 14 years, and Adobe recently announced the end of life for Flash after 24 years. I mean, that's an eternity in the landscape of planned obsolescence. Moles, the original website, has aged pretty well. The media clips don't stream, and the Flash links are defunct, but the HTML is great. My first instinct with Moles 2020 was to fix the old website, bring it back to life. But then I started thinking about the broken links and what they might tell me about memory, technology, and my aging body. At my last visit to the dermatologist, I was explaining this project to the doctor when he interrupted me politely and said, "Are you sure you don't want to talk about this after the full body review?" Oh my God. What was I thinking? Who pitches a media project naked on an examining table? Also, I don't want to distract him. I only do this every few years. When I was growing up, mole detection was based on an easy-to-remember A, B, C, D, E coding. A for symmetry, B, border irregularity, C, color variability, D, diameter, E, evolution. But this led to some anxiety for me and the doctors. I mean, what mole doesn't fit into one of these categories? Then in 1998, the ugly duckling detection came into play, which means that if all the moles on your body are a certain way, but one looks different, that one will turn into a beautiful swan and will live happily ever after. No, not really. It means you should get that mole checked out as soon as possible, because it might be malignant. Mole detection is an expertise, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. And dealing with uncertainty is not our species' forte. Now, Google and other companies are training algorithms to visually diagnose potential melanoma, and they say these algorithms are doing as well as the doctors. Imagine if all mole detection was done through artificial intelligence. Worst case scenario, algorithms, as part of a profit-driven system, begin to overdiagnose questionable moles because it makes more money. Great technology, but messed up system. Most likely scenario, only billionaires use artificial intelligence because they're the only ones who can afford it. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's the rich who would get human care, while the rest of us are stuck with machines, lost in algorithm hell. In the meantime, I'm improving my own skills in self-detection. Yes, it's for my health, but it's also a strategy to spend less time naked pitching projects to a dermatologist.
If you have more than 100 moles, the risk of melanoma is higher, and I'm pretty sure I fall into that category. So I decide to do a mole count, confirm the number. But counting moles isn't that easy. There's a very fine line between a mole and a freckle. It's kind of like this fine line I'm treading between being concerned and being a hypochondriac. To keep track of my moles, I start to map them. And it turns out that I'm not the first mole mapper. Melanography is an established expertise. I start with my face, and I find a mole in my ear. In ancient China, fortune tellers read facial moles to determine your fate, and I'd like to know what a mole in the ear means. So I do my own mole reading by consulting a webpage that's also running ads for palm readings and horoscopes. And I discover that a mole in the ear means, supposedly, that I'm talented, quick-witted, and blessed. One of the moles on my face hosts a stubborn, lone hair. In Chinese mole readings, a mole with hair is like a mountain with flora. It's alive and healthy. That is a very refreshing take on mole hair, but it's not enough to stop me from plucking it out. Facial moles have come in and out of fashion over the years. On medieval witches, a mole was ugly. On 17th century aristocrats, a mole was fashionable. On women in the 80s, a mole was sexy, but that was only if it was in the exact same spot as Cindy Crawford's. Today, since social media favors smooth, unblemished faces, there's not a lot of room for moles. The moles on my face, they don't fit the Instagram aesthetic, but they're not malignant. My doctor calls them wisdom spots. That helps. And as for my mole count, I'm at 201. I read that the risk of melanoma doubles if you've had more than 5 sunburns. I've definitely had more than 5. I came of age when the goal was to attract sun rays, when serious sun protection was SPF 4. At 14, over spring break, I covered myself in a mix of iodine and baby oil, and I made a tin foil reflector that I used just for my face. I got burnt so bad that I think I even burnt the bottom of my foot. This was normal behavior back then. I mean, this was before I learned about a hole in the ozone layer and before I questioned why a tan was even desirable. So I don't want another burn, which leaves me with 3 options. 1, stay out of the sun altogether. 2, cover up and overheat. Or 3, put sunscreen on and worry the whole time that I've slathered myself in chemicals I don't even understand. The sunscreen option is complicated. I'm not anti-sunscreen, but I've been reading about the amount of sunscreen that we secrete into the ocean. It's something like 14,000 tons a year. It's practically a sunscreen spill. And then some of the stuff in sunscreen, like oxybenzone, it mutates the DNA of corals. It's killing the reef. And I'm going to put that sunscreen on my skin? No. The good news, Hawaii just passed a ban on certain sunscreens, so I'm not the only one worrying about sunscreen spills. That's hopeful. Things get so complicated the more you know. I mean, it's crazy that I know the effects of sun on my skin, and I still sometimes get burnt. It's like buying organic vegetables wrapped in plastic, or flying when I know it's bad for the planet. I mean, how do I reconcile all of this and still just try to enjoy a day at the beach? The moles in my family go back generations. And on top of that, growing up, we spent all of our holidays at the beach. Back then, my family, we didn't make a connection between moles, skin cancer, and the sun. Now, it's practically all we think about. My dad has had 2 melanomas so far, one on his shoulder and one on his forehead. He's had other cancerous cells removed from his forearm, his back, and the top of his head. He's been bald since his early 20s, so he is an easy target. He even had a sarcoma removed from his eyelid. The first melanoma was the scariest. But since then, we've all started to normalize his frequent visits to the dermatologist. When my dad recounts his visits, he's calm, matter of fact. He's a lawyer, so his delivery sounds a bit like a legal briefing. Precise, informative, to the point. And this makes me feel better. I know what's going on. The last time my dad went to the skin doctor, I asked my mom if she could take some photos. I thought it might help tell the story. So they go to the appointment, and I'm in the middle of a conference when the photos start rolling in, live from the doctor's office. And I'm not totally prepared for these intimate close-ups of my dad's body. In the photos, There's a bloody spot on his arm where something was just cut off. There are patches where his skin is inflamed. And the doctor has circled other areas with a red pen, like a wrong answer. And my dad, with his eyes shut and his shirt off, he looks totally vulnerable. It's like seeing my dad's cancer up close for the first time. My dad's briefings were so matter-of-fact, I could detach myself. But these photos are real. And now I feel the connection between moles, melanoma, and mortality. I really can't concentrate on the conference, so I get up and leave. I call my dad. I need one of his briefings.
Okay, so we're just going to organize the chairs for the panelists, if the sort of the video makers, if they want to come up and have a seat, and we'll open up the floor to any questions or comments or any thoughts that were prompted in you as you watched the film. I think we'll have a portable microphone, so you can, perfect, great. And so you can just sort of raise your hand and let me know, or I'm happy to, you'll do it? Okay. And Bertie will come over and hand you the mic so you can pose your question to our panelists.
And if anyone online has any questions, just pop them into the chat and we can read them out, or you're welcome to turn on your mic. Just raise your virtual hand.
Great, thank you, Doug. As we're waiting for the questions, I actually, am I coming through? Yeah, okay, perfect. I actually have a question for Wendy. Wendy, how do you see storytelling contributing to intergenerational dialogue and understanding, and what role do older adults have in speaking about the past and the future?
That's a big one. It's a big one. It's interesting because I don't think, where do I start? In this particular project, I was only supposed to interview old people, but I had this independent, rebellious nature, and I thought since I was old, that already counted, and I could interview younger people. And so certainly for me, I found, even in that series of 9 interviews, that there were 3 people, let's see, Eric, 2 more, who were under 50, or 50 I think was the cutoff they were allowed, and there's 1 younger than that. And I have to say that they were very different, and hearing their stories, at least for me, I don't know how you felt about it, but hearing their stories really surprised me and connected me in a very empathetic way. Particularly the most nostalgic, I think, of all of the interviews was with the youngest person, the one talking about what had happened to all the places on the Main. So, some of these stereotypes that somehow we need the stories about the past from the old people, that may not be where it is. I mean, Aldo always impressed me because this isn't in the video you saw, but he, in the whole video, he talks not only about the past, but also the present. Certainly the garden is about the present, but then he goes on to the future and what Saint-Joseph is going to, he hopes Saint-Joseph will look like in the future. So, yeah, I think we have to be careful of those stereotypes of what's, the old people are the storytellers, the holders of the past, but maybe that's not really where they're at.
Well, I loved Aldo's garden, and I just, since you're right here, I just really, I was really made me feel like I know what I want to do next week. Yeah, it's quite something, and what a beautiful pretext to have a conversation and the things that bring us so much joy in our lives, and it was really beautiful. It seemed to me, I'll just say one comment I noticed was that conversation seemed to be a prompt for so many of these works, and most of us were really trying to have less visuals and to be able to listen more. So I loved the simplicity, even though it's so much work to get to simplicity. But I noticed that about each of the pieces.
Yeah, hi, this question's for Sam. In the sound that you used, there were, I loved how you expressed it as like choral. It became kind of choral. But sometimes I found those sounds very ominous, and other times almost angelic. And I wondered, was that pure serendipity, or did you have lots of choices that you had to make to come up with those?
Thanks for that question. It was quite serendipitous. There was obviously a bit of choice on our part as well. But to give a kind of brief description of the process, it was to take the voice and then convert it to MIDI, which is a kind of digital instrument communication protocol, so it can turn those the voice into musical notes that then can be used. And sometimes it's more or less dissonant, which creates tension or creates a more melodious kind of feeling. And it varies, but also in that one, depending on how deep the voice is sometimes, that can have a big impact on it. But I kind of moved around in the case of this one a lot, I mentioned taking those little fragments of the voice, looking for a place in the voice that seemed more to have some cohesive choral quality, but that did mean that sometimes it was quite dark as well. And that didn't necessarily correspond with a dark thought per se, and I think that is one of the, when you watch the whole series of 5 of these, that's one of the things that's interesting about them, is there's a lot of contradictory things going on and tension between what's shared. It's not, everyone is not in agreement. People had very different experiences that they shared, and so that comes through, I think, in the audio as well.
Yeah, we were thinking a lot about, just to build on what Sam was saying a bit, our first idea was, when we listen to people, or when I hear people speak a language I don't understand, I'm listening to intonation and I'm listening to the musicality of the voice. And so we wanted to play with that. And also we thought, well, how we didn't want to just have like music between, but we thought maybe even if you didn't know that you were listening to music made out of the actual voices, that there would be some kind of resonance for you. And so that was part of the conceptual idea that we were working with in putting the interviews together, but also then trying to work between male and high-pitched, low-pitched voices, different languages, etc., to just try and really think about it from an audiophonic point of view and not just a content point of view.
There was something I didn't say at the beginning that I wanted to say. In terms of this community of practice that we work in, that all of our work is different, very different in approach. And there are 2 here today. One is Marlene Chan, whose video is showing on that screen over there. It's autoethnography. And Ramsey Blair, who does stop motion animation, is over there on that other screen. And I think it's the richness of this community and Eric's ability to sort of allow us, and support us in whatever it is we want to do that makes this such an extraordinary experience for older adults.
Elizabeth, I'm curious to know, among the people who've seen your film, have
people come up to you and said, you've made me aware of something I never gave a second thought to, and I've gone to a doctor and I've discovered that I have to take seriously certain moles on my body. Has that happened with you?
That has not happened because the piece is not really circulated yet, but that would be an ideal scenario. So thank you for reminding me that there could be a really meaningful purpose to sharing these. Yeah, you're like, oh. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lined up to have, who's lined up to have an extraction because the mole that she went to her doctor to see needs to be extracted. So I think you will have put a lot of people onto this.
Yeah, mirror, mirror on the wall. Should you go
yes,
and get an exam?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's not the thing that we really like to do, go to the doctor. So just being there as allies to remind ourselves, yeah, that's good. Thank you, Aldo.
Oh, no. I'm good. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you so much for 3 really wonderful presentations. I have kind of 2 questions. The first would be for Kim. I really appreciated this self-reflective, immersive quality of this video. And I was wondering whether you could speak a bit more to the choice of visual images, because I thought it was interesting that you were juxtaposing these stories of peoples and communities with kind of these scenes of nature. And it seemed it was scenes of urban nature, which to me was so fitting because during the pandemic, I certainly came to appreciate all spaces of urban natures. I've never kind of walked down the St. Lawrence River so many times. So if you could reflect a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'll let Sam speak to that, but I wish Isabella could be here today because she's the one who made those videos. For the 2 of them that we did experiments with trying to find ways to, represent a mood. So one of the videos that you don't see is just a sheet of blue cloth fluttering in front of a window as people are speaking. And it almost feels like the movements of the wind are synchronized with the voices, but they're not. It's completely random. And then for this one, which came towards the end, Isabella, I believe, had been taking videos during the pandemic. She's a video maker, young video maker, and been going for walks. And so suggested that, would you like to see this? Maybe this could be useful. Let's try and see what happens if we use it. So this one's quite different visually. It's more busy in terms of changes than the other ones, which are even more slow moving. They'll kind of put you to sleep maybe, but that's not so bad. Sam, do you want to say something about that too? Because you worked with Isabella more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can add briefly just to confirm that yes, Isabella had taken these images, I think, very early on in the pandemic, maybe 3 weeks in, and just observing kind of the absence of people out and about and just walking around this green space in the spring and taking these images. Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is that I think she did a really excellent job kind of crafting the sequence of those images in relationship to the audio as well. And that's something that I really appreciate in that capsule, is the juxtaposition of those things.
Yeah, so really the nature was serendipitous. Another one of them takes place in the metro, and she just sits on the floor, and she's taken about 5 or 10 minutes of people's feet going by randomly. And so part of the idea at that point with the other ones was that when we were in the pandemic, we were stuck often in one place while the world moved around us. And so I think it kind of captures a bit of that mood. But also just not having too much image, almost like a painting, was what we were trying to get to and play with.
It's beautiful. If I just may ask kind of one more question to Liz. I was so profoundly moved, Liz, by this moment when the video kind of left us, when you just heard about your father and you stepped out of the conference. The last 7 months of my life have been taken up with trying to provide elder care across an ocean. And so I was wondering whether you could speak a bit more to these intergenerational elements, but also maybe if you could give us a taste of where you were taking us in this world premiere of Moles that was cut short, if you could speak a bit to the remainder of the documentary.
Well, so just to make it clear, this is an augmented reality experience. So I compressed them for the presentation today, but generally speaking, you'd see a photograph and then you'd go up to the image and it would unlock the layer, which is the white line. And so again, I've always been playing with this idea of if you get closer, what can be revealed? So the other thing that I was trying to do in this project was play with humor, which is hard to do, especially when you're dealing with heavy issues and the fear of mortality and things like that. But I find that humor is an increasingly important part of my life. And so yes, my mom, sends me these crazy graphic images when anything happens to her. And I've gotten kind of used to them, but like, how do we laugh at the things that we need to simulate and also kind of create space for what it feels like that you just said, to be far away when somebody you love is undergoing a process and the only thing you want is to be right there with them. But instead, you're getting weirdo images at a really inappropriate time. So just sort of finding the comic relief between some of the anxiety of how we negotiate those challenges. And again, those sort of awkward times of me sitting on the examining table. The other two videos are really about like beauty in moles, and like we sort of see them as, for some people they're beauty marks, for other people they're blemishes, and I'm trying to think, so each story is 20 years ago I took these photographs for the website, and then I retook the photographs with my aging body. And so each story is connected to a part of the body where there's moles. So like, I have one on the bottom of my foot, I have some in my ear, I have them everywhere. So, yeah, thank you for that question.
Do we have any other questions in the audience? Great.
Great, thanks for, this is great. I have two comments more. Sam, is there somewhere where there's longer files of these? You really should take the time to make a 20-minute piece out of all those things just on its own without that would be really beautiful, I think. It sounded really beautiful. Also, I wanted to, it was great to see Wendy's work again and also see the piece that we didn't get to show before, because it was really, really well put together. I also just wanted to invoke another engaged researcher, Cynthia Hammond, who has been off on health leave. And in my role at the library, she just loved the older folks who are doing oral history stuff, and always was very effective at finding opportunities and places and pushed us all along, so really kind of agitated us along in a kind of way that was really creative and made us feel really supported too. So I just wanted to make sure that she got a little shout out as well.
Could I just say, I really haven't talked about Eric's approach, but he is going to be presenting on the 9th, Wednesday the 9th, at 11 to 12:30, right, Eric? I think. 11:30 maybe? Yeah. 11, okay. And yeah, I'm going to be there for sure because I want to hear how he talks about it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. I think let's give a last round of applause to our video makers and our panelists. It was amazing. Thanks so much for joining us today. And be sure to check out, we're just at the start of Bold. This is just the kickoff. Sorry? This is day one. So be sure to check out the full program. There are programs just up to the side here and also online at bold2024.ca. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming.
And I'd also just like to mention tomorrow is actually at 11 o'clock, the official launch. So if you want to come with a glass of non-alcoholic beverage and some snacks at 11 and meet some of the other folks who are part of the exhibition, it'd be wonderful to have you back. And feel free to drop by at any old time and talk to any of us. We'd love to see you and have you. Thanks, Tristana. Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming in and persevering with us for this conversation. Everyone on the line and those of you in the space, thank you all for participating. We're going to be closing up the Zoom and the live stream now. Just a reminder that this conversation is available on our YouTube channel if you want to revisit it or share it. And don't forget, keep coming the rest of the week. Okay, have a good afternoon.